Hey guys, Jordan here. Today we're going to be building an all-AMD gaming PC in the Corsair 5000D. Going to be aiming for around $1,800 for this build. I have got a couple of choices that you can go a little bit cheaper on, and I've also got some more aesthetic choices, but of course I'll tell you about those as we go. So I'm looking forward to this one, and we'll get building after I quickly play some builds with this video sponsor. Acer proudly presents the Nitro 16 and Nitro 17 laptops. These models feature high-performance components including up to the Intel 14th generation Core i7 14700HX CPU and NVIDIA RTX 4070 laptop GPUs, ensuring high frame rates while maintaining low temperatures thanks to Nitro's liquid metal thermal grease and finely tuned fan system. With screen options offering up to a 2560 by 1600 resolution at 165Hz and a 3 millisecond response time, the Nitro 16 and 17 are excellent choices for those seeking a fantastic gaming experience in a portable form factor. These laptops come with a free month of Microsoft Game Pass, allowing you to enjoy some of the latest and greatest games, featuring titles such as Starfield, Forza Motorsport, Minecraft Legends, and many others. Visit the link in the description to learn more. So first of all, I'm going to get as many parts onto the motherboard as I can, and then we can get that into the case. For the motherboard, I'm using the NZXT N7 B650E. Full overview on the channel if you want to check it out in a bit more detail. It's got loads of I/O, Gen 5 PCIe and NVMe support, and it is a nice stealthy matte colour as well, which should match our case very well. Now you can save yourself some money from this board as it's a bit more higher end, especially with the Gen 5 support and obviously the aesthetics. Something like the Gigabyte B650AX V2, for example, I'll cover that on the channel as well. That will be more than adequate for this CPU. So the processor I'm going to be putting into this is the AMD Ryzen 7 7800X 3D. This is very kindly sent out by Scan Computers UK with some other parts you'll see in this video. They're a UK retailer that sell a whole host of different components. Anything you need for your builds, you can find everything you need on their site. I'll link them down below. A big thank you to them for sending these parts out. So the 7800X 3D is an 8-core and 16-thread processor. You've got a base clock of 4.2 GHz with this processor, and then it boosts up to 5 GHz. But we've more importantly got that level 3 cache that should hopefully got some FPS improvements when we get to our gaming later on. So I'm just going to open up the socket, and then we shall insert the CPU. If you've not done an AM5 one before, we have got a little triangle in the top left and then the same on the socket. But generally, for the rule of thumb for the modern CPUs, just align the text the right way up, portrait with the motherboard. So it's a lot easier, unlike the AM4 sockets that were rotated 90 degrees. So the socket cover pops off as you close the latch. Just make sure you keep the cover just in case you need to RMA the motherboard. So next up, the memory. I'm going to be using Corsair Dominator Titanium RAM for this. I've got a 32GB kit, so two 16GB sticks. This is running at 7200 megatransfers per second at CL34. Now, I just want to say that this is a first edition kit, which these are binned DIMMs, so they're a lot more expensive. You can still buy these, but for the sake of what I'd recommend to you guys is to get a more affordable kit that's just readily available. You can buy these if you want to, but the difference in performance for the gaming we're going to be doing isn't going to be that much. I'm just using these because it's what I've got on hand. So I'm going to open the second and fourth latch for the DIMMs, the two furthest away from the CPU with the space apart, and then we'll insert these sticks. Make sure you've got them the right way around. I clip in. These will also match the motherboard very nicely as well. That wasn't actually something that I actively chose to do, but just a nice coincidence. So next, let's look at our storage. I'm going to be using a Crucial T500 1TB. This is a Gen 4 NVMe. This has got a speed of 7300 megabytes per second on the read and then 6800 megabytes per second on the write. So I've just taken this off. You can see it's got a really beefy heatsink that's included. Will support a Gen 5 drive speeds and the heat that puts out. So unfortunately, because I've got the heatsink on and I don't think I can get it out without basically causing irreparable damage, I'm going to be using this without this heatsink. But if you get the one without the heatsink in the first place, you'll be able to use this cover, which obviously matches the motherboard and ties in a lot nicer. So I'm going to install this 45 degrees, and then I do need to go into my motherboard box to get the little screw that goes in, but then that will hold that in place. So the cooler I'm using is the Corsair A115. I have done a full review on the channel. So as I unpack this cooler, of course this is an air tower. You can go for an AIO if you'd rather, but from what I've seen from the testing of the 7900X 3D, it barely outperforms the 7800X 3D. So for the extra heat and things, unless you need those extra cores and threads for maybe productivity stuff, I think the 7800X 3D is one to go for, and an air tower should do it for cooling anyway. I'm just looking at this air tower, and I think I'm actually going to leave off the additional fan. We have got very tall DIMMs on this motherboard now with the Dominator Titaniums, and if we add the additional one, it's only going to cover up the RGB and also just sit very high. So for this one, I think I'm going to go single fan. It does perform very well though, so hopefully we'll be alright with the single one. We shall find out. First of all, we need to take off the stock brackets that's included on the motherboard. Very easy to undo, just 4 screws. So now those screws are out, those will just come away. Back plate is screwed in on AM5, which is a nice thing to see. Then we've got this little bar that will go across those, and then thread, which is what the actual cooler will screw into. Just sits on top like that. Then we've got these little 4 thumb screws that keep those held down. We need to take the fan off to actually install this cooler, and it also helps us to check the orientation. So we've got the Corsair logo and all the nicer side of the fan this way, so that means the air is going to go through right to left. So we can then take that off and then get it lined up to install. If you've got a new one of these coolers, you will have pre-installed thermal paste on the bottom, but as I've used this already, I'm going to be adding some onto the CPU, which is going to be not 2 at NTH2. So I've got up here thermal paste on, so I can now bring this down onto the actual cooler. So I'm going to start doing this up little by little. So I'm going to do a few turns on the top and then a few on the bottom, so it increases the pressure nice and evenly. So I've installed that down as far as I could, and then I've gone back a quarter of a turn, because sometimes you can put too much pressure on a AM5 chip, which is a bit weird, but it can actually push the pins off of the CPU and then it just won't boot. So if you do have booting issues and you're thinking why, if everything else is okay, then that could be a reason. So just putting the fan back down in there, that's ready to go. And I'll also just plug this into a 4-pin header at the top. So that's the processor, storage, RAM, and then also the cooler onto the motherboard. Now we can get this into the case. So today we're going to be using the Corsair 5000D Airflow. I've got a full review on the channel. It's a great case, very spacious and also very easy to build in. So a couple of things I want to mention just before we get the motherboard into the case. You can currently buy the 5000D and also the RM1000X as a bundle from Scan. So if you like the look of them, you can save yourself a little bit of money buying them together. Then also this is going to be our first of the aesthetic options that I mentioned at the start. We've got some Corsair RX 120s to put in this case. And this is the little hub you get with the Corsair RX starter kit. You can get these separately, also different lengths of cables should you need them. You can also stack these as well, so you can have a couple of layers thick if you've got a lot of fans in your case. There's an input on each side for your fans. The 3 on the front will also connect together, so we'll have one single cable coming off from 3 fans. Then the one in the back will have to run a little bit of a longer one too, but they'll go in each side of this. But it just powers by a single 6-pin PCIe, so really, really easy to connect. This is something I've been after from Corsair for a long time. We've used all that old stuff, and having 2 cables from each fan is not a good time. So I'm really looking forward to this. Like I mentioned though, we'll be doing a dedicated video on this. I'll put the card on the screen if it's live. Certainly check that out if you want my full thoughts though, because it is more expensive. So there's going to be a bit of a trade-off between price and performance. So certainly check that out if you want to learn a bit more. The Corsair logo, you can actually take that off as well if you want to. You can position these however you like. I don't believe there's a way for the cable either, so just plug it in wherever and it will find it. It's pretty intuitive, so certainly it will be a lot nicer to use these than that old stuff. So here are the fans themselves. They feel pretty rigid, pretty well built to be fair. On each end I've put the little adapter in for one side, but you can see on the opposite side we've got a little support there that goes in, and then we've also got one that carries the power and also the data. These also magnetize together, but then just clip together. So now I've got my 3 120mm fans all ready to go into the case. I'm going to put them in with a little Corsair logo on this side like that. So that'll be some nice fresh air being intaked. Then I just need to put the cable into the top, route it to the back of the case and plug it all in. So really nice, really simple as well. So far so good. Good job Corsair. So I've got the smaller cable coming from the bottom of the fans that are in the front, so the 3 120s. That's on the little cable here. So we could just connect this up maybe like this. I thought we'd use this little space here because it's very open. And I've got the longer cable that's included, just routing this from the rear 120mm. Then we can plug this into the other side like that. So then what we need to do is put the data and cables and things in the bottom there, and that can stay on this bit. So that's the additional 4 fans all installed with 2 cables rather than the old school stuff which would have needed 8. So I'm also going to just plug in the additional cables that this needs. We'll route this then down to then go into the motherboard tray at the bottom. Then we've got our PCIe for power with this little specific connector, and then again we'll route that down through and we connect that in when we put our power supply in, which I think we'll do next. So power supply, like I mentioned earlier, is the Corsair RM1000X, part of the bundle that was sent from Scan, so thank you guys. Now 1000 watts is over spec for this system, but this power supply does have a 0 RPM fan mode, so under lower loads it won't spin the fan, keep the system nice and quiet. You can also see I've got the Pro PSU cable kit in white. This was a little bit of a last minute addition. I'm not too sure, to be honest, if I'm actually going to use it in this. I will try it with and without, and obviously the result you'll see at the end will be my choice, but I've got this predominantly for another little mini series that I've got coming up, which I'm really excited for. So get subscribed and ding the bell so you don't miss that. Also, if you're wondering or you're using a 40 series card, Then Corsair also have the adapters to support the 12-volt high power, so you can match the cables up nicely. You'll be seeing those in the future video. Like I said, get subscribed, it's going to be awesome. Corsair are certainly a go-to for me for power. I've used a HX 850, I think it was, in my original build back in 2010. Still runs to this day, 14 years later. So absolutely solid units. Yeah, certainly one to go for if you're looking for a new one. So 24 pin for the motherboard, PCIe, one of those for the graphics card, and then one of those for the hub. And then we've got our two EPS connectors, so one will be a 4 pin and one will be an 8 pin. And then that's all we need. Feels a bit weird not having a SATA, but I suppose it makes life easier in the end, so win-win. I've just split one of the 4+4s to make life a little bit easier in a minute, and we'll run those all through. Now the screws for the power supply will come in the power supply box, but I'm just going to use the ones for the motherboard as they're the same thread. Here's our split one, so that'll be the extra 4. So I put one of the PCIe connectors up through where the motherboard goes, where our front panel is and stuff like that. For the second one, I'm going to put it through this little gap here, because we will need this for our Corsair hub. So I'm just passing through the front panel connectors. That's something we definitely want to do before the graphics card goes in. I've now done all the basic cables for this system. All that's left to do is get our graphics card and plug it in, and then we can see if it boots. So the card we're using for this system is the PowerColor Hellhound RX 7800 XT. Runs high ultra 1440p, no problem at all. You can also do some lower 4K if you wish as well. This was a really great price to performance card from Scan. They also kindly sent it out as well, so thank you guys. So now let's get this installed. So I'm going to be taking out the second and third expansion bracket in this case. You just pop out, and then we'll bring this in, line it up. There we go. Then just put the thumb screws back. Now we just need the power connections, so we'll just put these together to install. So now our system is complete. I did do the front panel connections as well, was a little bit fiddly. Couldn't really get that on camera, so I did do that. But you can just follow the instruction manual if you're unsure where to connect that. But now everything is complete, we can see if it boots. So now we're into the BIOS. I had a dodgy HDMI lead, so that's why it didn't come up. But we're now all okay. We can see the 7800X3D is there. 32 gigabytes of memory. We do need to set that now, so we need to go into the overclocking tab. So you can see 4800. We now need to go into the DRAM profile configuration, where it says auto. We'll press that, and we have a few options. So currently it's 4800 mega transfers at 1.1 volts. We're going to need to go up to 1.45 volts, so quite a considerable jump to be able to run 7200. So we shall now say XP1, and then we'll press F10, and then enter. See all the changes it makes. It does have to change a lot of different things, but then that will go through, retrain the memory again, so it might take a few minutes, so don't panic. Then we should get into the BIOS, and then hopefully we'll see that change of 7200 mega transfers per second. Once we see that, we can then install Windows, and then finally play some games. So I've now done all of my benchmarks and tests. I'll run you through those, and I'll give you a bit of a brief conclusion. First of all, some free benchmarks if you want to download those to compare to your own system. Might be useful for this build, something that you might be looking to upgrade to. I've got 3D Mark Time Spine, Still Nomad, Geekbench, Blender Render, and then also Cinebench. I also ran Crystal Disk Mark to see if the Crucial 500 lives up to the stated speeds, and it even went over with all the software installed, so that was a pleasant surprise. Moving on to gaming, all of these titles are set to high settings, with the exception of Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which you run maxed out. So first, Cyberpunk, which is the more intensive titles. In 1440p we have a nice 3-digit average frame rate. This is without using anything like FSR2, so you could easily get into the high refresh rates for a nice 144Hz monitor for that buttery gameplay. Onto 4K high, and we're very close to a console-like frame rate, and again, if you wanted to use FSR, you could certainly run this at a nice smooth level, even in 4K. Dirt 5, one of the easier to run titles, we saw a nice 185 FPS average in 1440p, then 111 in 4K. Very good for the 4K results. Apex Legends is another title that's easier to run. I saw an average of 242 frames in 1440p, then 144 in 4K, so bang on the high refresh rate monitor range, no need for FSR here. On to Starfield, this title is still on the harder to run side, and I mean every GPU, Nvidia, AMD, Intel, they all struggle. Just putting that out there as some people think I mean one certain brand. Nope, all of them. In 1440p I saw an average of 75 FPS, then 47 in 4K. It's also worth mentioning that Starfield now supports FSR, so I'll certainly make use of that here to boost those frames. Can this PC run Crysis? Oh yes, at an average of 195 frames in 1440p, no less too. Stepping up to 4K does get a little more intensive at an average of 77 FPS, but a good result, especially as this title favours Nvidia cards. Going to max settings in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, we see a nice 160 FPS average in 1440p. It's great, as you can know, you can just whack those settings up with a high refresh rate monitor and you're good to go. In 4K we average 77 frames. This is maxed out though, so if you do want to play this in 4K, you've certainly got a lot of options to play about with to get those frame rates up. Last but not least, Far Cry 6. This game can be surprisingly intensive, but not that you know that, given that AMD combo spat out an average of 190 frames per second in 1440p, then 90 frames in 4K. Now, since benchmarking this system, I have changed my methodology a little bit, so future videos will have a minimum, maximum, average and a 1% low, just for those that want to see specifics. If you're wondering around temperatures, I saw a maximum delta on the CPU of 59.3 and 56.2 on the hotspot for the GPU. I did have to use down to temperatures though, as the temperature between measuring the CPU and GPU was different. You can just add on your general room temperature as a rough idea of what you could expect temp-wise where you are using this exact system. Now, the combo of the 7800X3D and the XT I think is fantastic. Wholeheartedly recommend this system for anyone that's looking to build a new one or upgrade from what they're currently using. When you do use an AMD CPU and an AMD GPU, you do have a couple of extra features like the AMD Infinity Fabric and also Smart Access Memory. Infinity just allows better communication between the components, and then the SAM allows the full access of the GPU for increased performance. If you want to know anything extra about those, then I will leave my Scan AMD bundle video linked on the card on the screen, as I went into that a bit more depth there. So as you can see, I didn't use the white cables in this system in the end. I went for more of a stealth system, but I have got some plans for those white cables, so get subscribed and ding the bell so you don't miss that. The 5000D though is very easy to build in. It would be a great first time builder's case with its spacious size. The combo I think of parts is really good. The Corsair coolant and titanium sticks look great on the NZXT motherboard. As you can see, I have put some LED strips in this and just set them to white. I'd certainly recommend it for this case, especially if you're going to buy it in black, because it's obviously quite a dark tint and we're using all black parts. I like the additional fans, even if they do add some more cost to the build. Using one cable for like a whole bank is great. I'm really looking forward to doing more with these. Maybe we can ask Corsair nicely to send one of the big cases and see if we can fill it. That would be quite a challenge, but we'll make an interesting video. Let me know what you think of this one though in the comments box below. If there's anything else you'd like to know, of course ask there and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. All the parts that I use will be linked in the video description if there's anything you want to pick up. Thank you all for watching. Thanks to Scan Computers, Corsair, NZXT and Crucial for sending out the parts for this build, and I'll see you all in the next one.